Former minister and founder of Something or Other Publishing, Wade Franson is the host of Created in the Image of God, a series that examines the role of religion in society, from messianic returns to the emotive responses transmitted through our culture. Wade fearlessly addresses reality claims from all directions, objectively exploring their compatibility with Holy Scripture. Joining him is Daniel Sanderson, CEO of Planksip, an international philosophy and cultural media outlet, helping emerging thought leaders with personal branding by co-creating organic content. Tonight's episode: the power of community and the unexpected loss of life.
Well, everybody, welcome. This is a little bit different. We've got three people appearing all at once. Now, don't lose it. We're doing this for a particular reason. We have a special guest in today's studio, Patrick Novotny. I've pronounced that the North American way. There's a bit of a Czech accent, but I'm not going to attempt to butcher it. He is the newcomer to the show, and he can comment on that a little bit later. But we also have a returning guest, Dr. Elise Cortez. And so if anybody can guess in the comments as to what the topic is tonight, there's been a bit of a hint right at the beginning, but you know what? Give some good questions. Throw them out. Let's see what we can do to stimulate a nice conversation about the loss of life. Now, what does that mean to say that we're going to have a nice conversation about the loss of life? I will preface that none of us here on stage tonight are dealing with an immediate loss of life that I'm aware of. So I think we're all in a good mental place, but that does not mean that there are not people out there that are not dealing with this on a daily basis. Loss of life is a part of life, and that's what we're here to talk about tonight. Now, the show in itself, as listeners who tune in on a regular basis understand, the show is and has a religious undertone to it. So we're going to be trying to grapple that. We're going to bring up the idea of religious versus secular, and we're going to have this conversation about not which is better, but what are some of the differences. And yeah, I think that's a fair conversation to have. So I'm going to start off by talking to Patrick. And Patrick, how's it going, man? How are you doing this evening?
It's going really good. I love the weather's getting good. It was a short January. The weather, well, we're living in the same part of the world, so we've had a little bit of a warmth come through. Like, hey, it's summer now, even though we don't really get too much snow here. But yeah, I'm looking forward to enjoying summer weather, and kids are off school. So, we've got we live on an island already. This is a destination. So, there's places to explore right here on Vancouver Island.
Yeah. Okay. So what Patrick's alluding to is that he's from Vancouver Island, just like myself, and Elise, she's from Texas. So, we're all kind of in the same relative time zone, and we're going to have a nice conversation about loss of life and how to deal with loss. And just to bring everybody up to speed, Elise is an expert on this, aren't you, Elise?
An aspiring expert. How's that? I would never call myself an expert, but it is an area that I know a little something about, and that I'm learned in to a certain degree. Yes.
Right. So maybe explain to Patrick, before I talk about his upbringing, I want you to explain to Patrick, just to give you the context, Patrick, Elise's work actually is specifically to loss of life and dealing with grief. And maybe you could tell Patrick a little bit about your PhD studies and your subsequent books and your work that you've done over the last decade.
Okay, sure, Patrick. So my PhD is in human development. So really what I am today is I am a management consultant, and I work specifically with meaning and purpose. And what's really interesting about those fields is, if you look at purpose, especially, purpose really works hugely in part, because we die and we don't know when the exit ramp is coming. And so that gives us an urgency with which to live. So a lot of the work that I'm doing is really about helping people to mobilize their energies and such to optimize their lives around meaning and purpose, knowing that we will all leave at some point. So that whole interest started when I lived in Rio de Janeiro in my mid-20s for 3 years, and I got to experience what it is to consume life, have a beautiful, beautiful lifestyle with a live-in maid, chauffeur, gardener, jetting all over the continent, but not feeling like I was actually giving something. I wasn't actually serving. I was just consuming, and that is actually a terrible thing for a human to experience. That's where I learned to reach for meaning and purpose. That was where it got activated for me. Fast forward many years, coming back to the United States, I did my PhD. It started in the late 90s. I researched meaning in work and identity, found these 50 modes of engagement, kept researching. And as I kept researching, I kept getting deeper and deeper into the whole meaning and purpose trail. And then I found myself hosting my own radio show called Working on Purpose. It's been on the air for 8.5 years. And then that just naturally led to me then accumulating more knowledge and ideas that I wanted to share with people, which then led to the first book in 2020, which was around purpose. The second one, which was published with Something or Other Publishing, Women's Stories of Purpose. And then I went on to really write a couple of books about leadership and culture that are anchored in meaning and purpose. And then one of the books, one of the last books is also published by Something or Other Publishing. It's the book on loss. It's what I learned about losing both of my parents 28 days apart in January 2019, and how I learned to make sense of those losses through the lens of logotherapy and help others navigate through loss in the same way that I learned how to do so. So that's a short synopsis of where I've been the last little bit of time and how you find me here today.
Wow.
Patrick, what are your thoughts before I ask you,
Wow.
kind of lob it back to you and get you to recite a little bit of your history?
Well, I want to start off with saying, Elise, sorry that you lost both your parents. And I'm sure we'll be talking more about that in a bit. Yeah, I grew up in Ontario. I was born in Montreal. Parents thought I should be in English speaking. My parents are immigrants. They both immigrated from Czech Republic many moons ago. They didn't come together. They met in Montreal, and that's where I was conceived. I was born there. We moved to Ontario. I guess my dad was looking for particular machinist work that he does. So I grew up in Hamilton, Ontario. I guess that's people have opinions about Hamilton, but I moved to Victoria because it's a very beautiful place, and we didn't have the same sort of weather. It's a very nice mild weather. I probably grew up as a pretty normal kid that got into a little bit of trouble, but nothing extreme. I ended up joining the Navy Reserve when I was 18 years old. Not knowing exactly, having direction of where I wanted to go. I made some of my best friends joined at different parts of the military, so that was sort of a motivator to join and do something. It was an amazing experience. There's some friendships there that I bonded with people that have since passed away, not due to anything in the military. That's been a great experience. I stayed there for 5 years. I ended up being posted out here in Victoria. Met my wife here. That's kind of the long and short story of like settling out here. That's the kind of convincing factor. Be like, oh well, it's really nice here. Oh, and there's a girl that I really like.
Mm-hmm.
So, made the move, drove across Canada to settle into Victoria. Victoria is not an easy place to settle into. It could be a little bit cliquey, I would say. It's harder. People have said this. It's hard to make friends. I just found that the longer I've been here, it's quite easy to make friends, but you have to put effort into it. And and I came here not knowing what I was going to do. I just knew I'll figure it out once I get here. I did some construction work, and then I ended up getting my real estate license. So I've been doing that for the past 20 years now. And there's been some challenges in that, but Victoria has been a great place to raise a family. I've got 4 kids now. How old are they? Hold on. 11. They will be all odds this year. 11, 13, 15, and by October, 17 years old. So, parenting is tough. It's challenging. but it's rewarding.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
That's probably, without dragging it out too much, that's kind of the high level view, right?
Oh, well, the purpose of that part of the show is really to give the viewers and each other, all of us, kind of a context for who we're actually speaking to. So let me throw this out to you here, Patrick. Let's jump into belief systems, in particular, a church and the advantages of a religious substructure, I guess, for loss and for grieving. Is this something that you've been able to witness firsthand, or is it more theoretical? What are your thoughts on that?
Firsthand.
Mm.
Not that I haven't, so I deal with a lot of people for work and at different times in their lives. So, it's without, sometimes people are not willing to share, what's exactly going on in their lives and their motivation behind making a big change in their lives. But you can tell, and they will tell you after a while, right? But they just need time, before they confide in you, right? But personally, where can I start with this? So I grew up in traditionally, like, Czechs are typically Roman Catholics, I guess the majority of them. So being in Montreal, that was kind of a good fit. Um, my cousins and my aunt and uncle, they went to church, so I went to Sunday school once in a while with them. Our family didn't really go to church, but it seemed like there was a belief in there, but just not in a traditional, customary manner. Like, we didn't go to church. But and then as I grew up, it always seemed like, questionable to me. Like, oh, is there really a God? Is there such a supreme being? Well, what about all these other religions? And then all these other ideas started coming in and sort of confusing my thoughts. So um, I was skeptical for a long time. And then having children sort of brought me back in. It's like, wait a minute. Even if I have a lot of questions, maybe that's the right environment to bring my children to, so they could be surrounded by, like-minded people, good morals, that kind of thing. And I was still skeptical after some years, um, until I started asking more questions and more, and that led me to getting the right kind of information, or enough of that information where it's like, oh, wait a minute. For me, my belief system is without a doubt, like, I am a believer of Jesus Christ, and I believe in God. I believe in, like, it's not just a superior or a supreme being. There is a God. So that's where my head is at, with grieving. I think I've seen people take it differently as a witness. Some people hide it, and then it comes out after a while, and it's like a floodgate. I'm probably like this. I bottle up feelings, and then it all comes out at once. So I'm very good at hiding how I feel. Um, yeah, uh, I mentioned that I was in the military, and a few years ago, I probably haven't seen these people for 15, no, more than 20 years. Some people I've met sort of because I live in Victoria. It's a military town. We have a base, naval base here. So people might come through town, and I might see them or meet them. Yeah, but there was a particular person at the beginning of all of that, starting in the military, was new experience. It was sort of a core group of people that we all hung out together. We're all, like, pretty good friends, trust each other, I think. And then I heard news that one of the people fell ill to a disease, and yeah, I didn't realize how much it affected me until there was this one night, and I just, by myself, just cried. All of this just came out of me, right? And I didn't realize I had those feelings.
Wow.
Like, you hear about somebody's passed away. It was on social media, and at the beginning I was feeling like, oh, yeah, that sucks. I don't want to hear that kind of news. Um, but it took a while before I realized how much it affected me.
Mm.
My dad passed away is it 2 years ago now? It's probably, no, I think it's about a year. It's not a year and a half yet. Um, and at first I had no response. My dad's in the Czech Republic. So my half brother messaged me, your dad's not doing well. There was a few phone calls. I think my dad might have called from the hospital, but he was sort of incoherent, right? I don't know if medicated, that kind of thing. So it's like, oh, what's going on over there? Um, and and I had a really, how do I put this? I haven't talked to my dad for years at a time since he was in Ontario, but there was always a strong bond there. Like, it's a very fiery bond with my dad. I know my dad loves me. I love my dad. But we would argue. We'd argue always. There would be always something. So, it wouldn't be too long before something got loud in the house, right?
Yeah.
So that, there was like, it was frustrating in that way growing up. But, and then when I heard, this is how I'll put it, my feelings or my coping was triggered when I would hear about somebody else's. They would share their story about oh, my parents just passed away, and all I would do is they'd be talking, and I would stop hearing things, and I would think about my dad. So that was a bit of a surprise, where I could bottle up my feelings or block out feelings, and in that way I couldn't control that feeling. That was difficult. So I could keep rambling, but
No, that's like, I mean, and I don't know if on a spectrum of hosts whether I'm a good host to let that, but that when I feel somebody is tapping into an emotion like you have been, I want it to unfold, and I think that's important. I think people gravitate to emotional honesty, and that's really what you were doing, and it was. I want to thank you for sharing that. Um, Elise, let me run this back to you, and I'll give you kind of a choice. You can take more of the doctor approach, expert approach, or um, make it personal if you want. I'm sure you've already shared that you've had to deal with the loss of both your parents in a very short period of time. How does what Patrick? How does uh, what he's saying? How does that resonate with you? Does it does it trigger anything that you feel you want to share?
Thanks, Daniel. Yeah, I'm going to go the non-doctor route here for that personal route. I was present as you were sharing, Patrick. I could hear it, just like I think what Daniel was getting present to is we could feel you kind of feeling your way in the dark, if you will, trying to be able to articulate what you were feeling and how things occurred for you. And I could feel you kind of going down memory lane a little bit as you took us through that share. And what I got present to is just, the achingly beautiful color of life. This is what it is to be a human being. We are walking the planet. We don't know what we don't know. We're grappling and trying to understand and make sense of all this myriad of data that comes our way with, just living in the world. And then when we lose someone we love, it doesn't always make sense. Seldom it makes sense, especially in the beginning. So what I got present to is just, that what I love to do in the work that I do is I loved the intimacy of being with people. In my work, even coaching with executives, there's an intimate exchange there. You are in this person's world and life. They let you in, just like you let us in. And that to me is the most precious thing about getting to do this kind of work and having these kinds of conversations, is that intimacy, that connection where you share on that beautiful level. And in so doing, you invite the rest of us to come in with you. That was what was happening for me. And then therefore you expand the room. And therefore you expand the room, Patrick. Isn't that amazing? Sorry, Daniel.
Oh, and you punctuated it so nicely, Elise, to expand the room. You really do, right? You really expand it, and I'm gonna further expand it. I think if I'm using that metaphor and illusion properly, I something happened exactly what Patrick was describing. I'd simultaneously kind of thought of a few different things and applied that vignette on my own experience. Um, my stepfather had passed away a number of years ago, and it was and my grandfather, which was a kind of like the patriarch of the family, and they it's not that they weren't close together. There wasn't um, even a direct relation between the two of them. It's just that they were significant people in my life, and I don't think I realized till afterwards. And then I want to bring this back into a religious context for a minute. I'm I've said on the show I'm a secular believer. I'm gonna take that for what it is. It's just I maintain the secular anchor, but it just there's a beauty in belief that's growing in me that I'm really appreciating and enjoying. So my point is, I think when younger people are experienced or are exposed to certain things, major life events, they don't quite know the gravitas of these events. They don't, right? And I felt like somebody who had experienced loss of life, but not somebody so significant, like so part of your being, right? And then it starts to make you reflect about those other people in your life that are also very, very significant. And you can imagine, you can say, there's going to be a day when I won't be able to hear them on the telephone. I won't be able to hear that voice, or I won't be able to have that argument, as Patrick had explained about his dad. No longer will I be able to have that. And then I'm not even going to describe the emotion. I'm just going to say there's something there, and we can try and unpack it, but I don't even know if it requires explanation. It's just the fact that you realize that there is a finite factor to that piece. And for me, I've reflected on it and thought it's remarkable. And just as an observer, witness, maybe as Patrick had said, and I know the undertones of religious undertones there, or overtones, right? But you can think to yourself, you can think, as flawed and incomplete as we are, our memory is something that dissipates. And when you think about it, if our memory dissipates, and hold on a sec, I think it was a really great point, but this thing of mine is making some weird noises. So memory will dissipate, and you won't be able to picture that person's face anymore or hear their voice anymore. There's a period where the memory lives on, but of course, if that sound came back, you'd instantly know it, but you can't recall it. You can't quite make out the face and as much as you would have as the time moves on, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's really interesting. So going back to the point about the young children, I think that's maybe an interesting aspect of either family or the idea of exposing children to a religious institution is they don't quite understand it until they start to progress through life, and still until they. Would you agree with that, Patrick?
From my experience, 100%. And I find our kids, they're almost accepting accepting it just on face value of what's being told to them, especially at their younger age. Um, like this is there is a God, there's Jesus, and they sort of don't question it until they sort of maybe get a little older and they test you, right? And it's almost like I'm not ready to be tested. I'm still on the journey myself. But I'm hoping that you know, leading by example, like by my faith, that will be enough. Even if they stray, or even if they, they're teenagers and frontal lobes are not fully formed, like gonna be, they might do some stupid things, and make irrational decisions. But that that our example as parents will be that shining light for them. Even I've heard so many stories about, especially someone's grandma. Parents might have been atheists, non-believers, something, but grandma was a believer, you know, and would constantly pray or talk about prayer, or say that, I pray for you all the time, Daniel. And then after, when everyone else has given up, grandma hasn't given up on you and continues to pray, and things turn around. So I've heard that story from many people. I want to add to what you said earlier, Daniel, about your stepfather. Maybe that's not kin, but it's somebody who's made an impact. And I think the ones that I think the ones that will affect us the most in grieving will be the ones that have impacted us or created a bond. Maybe that was sure. It could be family, it could be siblings, but mentors, maybe best friends, other people that they might not have to be friends, but if there was something significant about your relationship with them. I'm sure for not me. Um, I'm sure when you have an ex-wife or ex-husband die, the ex-spouse, I bet you they grieve. They go through a process as well, even though they may not be together anymore, as an example. So I think that's how, uh, yeah, even people from work that meant something, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, Elise, what about what kind of carry forward examples do you draw on from your parents and your parents passing?
Carry forward examples. What does that mean?
Well, did they really teach you to work and strive? Was it a work ethic, or a sense of never giving up?
Mm.
Um,
Yeah. Okay. Yes, those things were definitely present. So, first, you have to know that my mother was married 5 times by the time she was 28 years old, and I was in second grade, and I'm from the first marriage, so I got to see the whole revolving doors. So when she got to number 5, and I was in second grade, I realized very quickly that she had hit the jackpot. This was like a fairy tale marriage. I mean, they should have never met. It was amazing. It was a miracle, and they loved each other, like really loved each other. It was so beautiful to get to it. So my mother finally got that. And they were very hard workers. They were restaurant or farmers first and then restaurateurs. I learned a work ethic when very, very young. So grateful for that. So I learned the work ethic piece, and then I also got to witness love, real love, beautiful love. So those are a couple of things that I definitely carried forward. And my mother was ready to go. She'd been battling with COPD for years and had, broken vertebrae and was on 24/7 oxygen. She had the jet fuel on her backpack. She was ready to jet out of this world. She was done with her suffering. And so, coming together as a family to bid her adieu and take care of her and handle her affairs after she left was something that brought us all together and also taught me something. There were some forward-reaching messages in that community piece of coming together to handle that loss. What we didn't expect is that my father would follow her out largely of a broken heart 28 days later. He did not want to live without her. It was so beautiful. I mean, really. I mean, when I got the news that he'd had a stroke, I went, wow. I was blown away. And it hit me, the power of love. So my parents taught me a lot about living, and that's why the book that I wrote is called Coloring Life: How Loss Invites Us to Live More Vibrant Lives, because it's the achingly beautiful piece of loving somebody and missing them when we're gone that helps us remember to be alive and to celebrate that we do get to live. So from my parents' losses is why I ended up writing this book about the celebration of life, the vibrancy of life. So for me, those are all parts of the lessons that came from those losses and what they taught me while they were here.
You know what? I think it would be very, I mean, that's beautiful. I can feel the emotion all the way. Patrick and I could feel the emotion all the way on Vancouver Island. But so there is, I believe, let's just see if we've got it here. Hold on a second.
Can I jump in, Daniel, while you're getting your thoughts together?
Yes, go ahead, Patrick.
At least that's really, I think it's really amazing to identify that, like when you have a partner that just can't live without the other partner, like that, the broken heart death. And I don't have any like a partner. I don't have an example like that. I just remember this fellow realtor actually. He passed away, and I talked to his partner, and she was telling me about they live on some rural property, and the bunnies were killed by I can't remember, a raccoon something, and he was heartbroken. He was completely heartbroken, and I can't remember if it was a week or 2 weeks later, and it's one of those things where I talk about bonds, and I didn't really know this person, but he was always super friendly, always stopped to talk with me. We would bump into each other in the grocery store, parking lot, somewhere, a work thing. Yeah, and it was just like, it was one of those surprise events when I heard that he passed away. I went to his funeral, and there we go. I'm all bottled up, and all of a sudden, everything just like, I just start crying. I can't stop myself. Just start crying, right? And that's not to take away from your parents passing away, Elise. It's just remembering. How about that? Just fondly remembering people that have touched us in such a way that is surprising. I didn't. It's not a mentor, just a super nice person. So I'm always pleasant to talk to, always, big smiles. We run into each other by accident, and then next thing you know, my wife's asking me, why did it take an hour to go get milk at the grocery store? Oh, I bumped into so and so, right?
Mm-hmm.
So of course, this is, I don't know what it's like down in Texas, but Victoria is kind of a medium-sized city that's like a small town. It's hard, I'll put it this way, it's hard to be anonymous. You're likely to bump into somebody at the Walmart, at the grocery store, and different places. So it's kind of neat here. But yeah, I just wanted to share that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Let me play it, guys. We'll be right back. Hold on.
Yeah.
guys, I'm back here with one particular comment, and this is from Ensign Rahim. He says, "Is the feeling of loss necessary for our growth and development?" And that struck me as very interesting. As a philosopher, I think, okay, well, necessary to our growth as a human being. Loss is definitely a part of it, and necessary. That's a really interesting aspect. So, what do you think, Elise? Do you think it's necessary?
I saw that question earlier in Sun. Thank you very much for posing it. On all your other comments as well, by the way. Thank you for engaging with us. I don't know if it's necessary per se, but it's one heck of an effective catalyst. So I do, what I can tell you is that we generally don't grow without some kind of struggle or challenge or, deficit or something. It doesn't happen when we're sitting very comfortably on the couch eating our bonbons, watching our favorite show on television. The growth doesn't just sneak up on you and say, ta-da, I'm here. It needs to be evoked, because we as humans really do want to live in, we're designed, to be able to conserve energy. And so that includes resting and putting forth little effort until we get motivated to do so. So to grow and develop and really become our optimum best, we do need those catalyzing forces that encourage us, that help us find and access that necessary energy that it takes us to take on those challenges, to deal with that, whatever's missing or what we have to overcome in order to realize the growth. So I don't know, again, if loss is necessary, but it is surely incredibly effective.
That's really good. Patrick, any thoughts on that before I pull the comment down?
Certainly. I think a feeling of loss, I'm not sure if that's necessary for growth and development, or a loss like being a milestone. I think it can crush some people. I think if you loss of a partner, uh, even if it's a divorce, I've talked to pastors that work on the street with homeless people, and many men that are out there that their wives have left them for, I don't know, I don't care what the reason is, but that's the situation right now. Suicide rates among men that have been divorced or gone into drug addiction or alcohol addiction or whatever coping mechanism there is. And the symptom of that is a lot of the times homelessness, not being able to control that. So I don't think it's necessary for growth. I think it's that's a very drastic loss. Like, it could be a death as well, right? And obviously, Elise's father, heartbroken, disastrous. I don't see that as a vehicle for growth. I think it's very damaging to the soul.
Oh, can I add something on that end that I want to add to this? Because this is from my perspective
Please.
of being a logotherapist. So logotherapy is an existential psychology branch, and it comes from Dr. Viktor Frankl's work. And the thing about logotherapy, part of the reason I chose to study it and thread it through my consulting and my practice, is because I like that it's an optimistic approach to life. And it teaches at its core that, one, meaning is our central concern as human beings. This is what our chief source of motivation is, and this is what we're looking for in life. It also teaches that there are no negative or tragic situations that can't be transmuted into a positive accomplishment but for the stand we take to them, including death and loss and pain. So there's a tragic triad in logotherapy that speaks to those. And so how I relate, loss is something that can teach us about really living. It can teach us to appreciate those that are with us. And that's part of the lessons that I talk about in my book. So in my view, when we think about, is loss necessary for growth and development? Maybe not, but it surely gives us a place through our choice between the stimulus of losing someone and our response to that, to what import or meaning we're going to give to that, and how it will help us inform the way we're going to live the rest of our lives and what kind of a person we're going to allow ourselves to grow and to be. So loss can be very much, I see, and I frame it as as it can be a positive contribution to your life, but for the way that you allow yourself to relate to it and learn from it. In my case, I learned tremendous things about living from the losses of my parents. And that's a lot what my book is about, that I'm passing that on. So how we relate to loss is critical, and I would say defining.
I think that's an amazing. I think that's an amazing way to explain it. Um, maybe where I'm coming from is not everyone is as strong-willed to come through on the other side. You know, Viktor Frankl probably read one of the best books I've ever read in my life as a Holocaust survivor.
Mhm.
Incredible journey to come out through that, and then strong enough to bring to the rest of the world what happened in his story. So yeah, I don't know. I don't think everyone is strong enough to take. Let's say there's a certain amount of population that is strong enough that they can really take a beating, or they can take a tremendous loss in some way and survive that. I think many can't. I don't.
Yeah. So what you're describing, Patrick, is that in one side there's the fragility of life. I think that's the theme you pull out. It's we can be very fragile and at the same time resilient. And and probably what you're emphasizing, Elise, is that it's through these lessons that other people give us strength. I would say, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's a really interesting approach. I guess I don't know how I would approach being in a Nazi concentration camp. I don't know if I would have seen that same light that Frankel saw. Um, yeah, I may have been extinguished, right? He must really be an anomaly in terms of some sort of a, if you're describing it as a guiding light that teaches humanity, that's a pretty special being to be able to do and go through what he went through and still be able to um, I guess yeah.
Right, not
Well,
to be burdened with a PTSD.
he probably was for a while, but so two things to that
Yeah.
brilliant point, Daniel. Two things. One is he wasn't the only one that got through it that way. What he discovered through his work was, and this is, he went into the the concentration camps with this idea, his theory of the import of meaning, and what he discovered is that those fellow comrades in the Holocaust camp with him, the ones that actually had hope, something that they felt like they could live for, they were hoping for when they could get out. Somebody's waiting for them. The work they were going to get to do when they left were the ones that generally survived. And it was the ones that lost that connection to possibility, to something to live for, something to strive for. The ones that literally could almost immediately be the ones that fell over and died right there next to him. So he wasn't the only one that carried that through. He is probably the only one that carried through and went on to write 40-some books and have been an instructor to so many thousands of us who have now taken on his torch to become a logotherapist. I did also help co-found the Viktor Frankl Meaning Academy as well, so I am continuing his work. The second point that I wanted to make about logotherapy that's very pertinent to this show is what logotherapy is really doing at the very end of the day is it's helping people to marshal and presence their own spiritual resources that are always with them, regardless of their faith. And that's one of the reasons I love logotherapy, is that you're, by practicing it as a counselor, as a therapist. I'm not a clinical therapist, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. What you're doing is you're helping the other person gain access to those spiritual resources that are already inside of them, activate them, and help them deal with that loss. And that's why I love practicing it. That's why it works for who I am as a positive psychologist kind of a person. I'm a growth-oriented person. One of my values is, empowerment, and certainly growth and learning. They're all other ones. So that's one of the reasons that I think logotherapy works so well with loss, and why I use it as a lens and as a tool to help people through loss.
Interesting. So, for people that don't know what logotherapy is it derived from logos, like the word, and the philosophical and religious um, meanings of logos? Can you explain that?
Yes, it's logotherapy comes from Greek meaning, of course, and then therapy, of course, is the treatment of such. So it's really a treatment, through meaning essentially, and so it's really helping people to discover the meaning behind whatever happens in their lives. What's in there for me to learn from that? What's in there for me to grow, learn, expand my person in this, and which really, again, it's a positive stance. It's an enlarging stance, and it enables people to be able to see what they really can deal with. So it pulls and encourages and elicits, their own greatness to be able to deal with whatever life throws at them.
Interesting. So, this is a fairly well established discipline, I guess, or
Hmm.
since approximately the 1940s, I suppose. Um, is it fairly widespread in throughout the world, or how would you describe this and this work and some of the affiliates um, that you come across?
Yeah, there are practitioners all over the world. This is, and the great thing is we're all using it in different ways. I mean, when I finished my what's called a diplomate, which is like the master's level of logotherapy, and I was presenting my project, I think there were like 70 of us that were finishing. We were from all over the world. One woman is so fascinating. She is in um, the Arab world. I forget which country she's in, but she's actually using logotherapy to help build nations. Now she's a little small stick of a woman, 38 years old or so, and she's helping to use logotherapy to build nations and create peace in the Middle East. I think that's pretty amazing. There are people that are using logotherapy as a way to be able to help people gain their optimal physical health. There are people that are obviously using it in their counseling kind of work. There are people that are using this inside organizations, and that's why I call myself an organizational logotherapist. You have people like Dr. Alex Patakos, who has created a whole house of meaning. Meaningsology is his methodology that he uses in places like the United Nations and other amazing places like that. I mean, it's incredible what's being done with logotherapy today. So yeah, it's a thing.
Interesting, interesting. What does meaning mean to you, Patrick? Did you know it was so extensive, i.e., a discipline of logotherapy, or um, what comes to mind when I say logotherapy?
I wasn't aware of logotherapy. It sounds interesting. Um, if it's starting to talk about like I'm completely unaware of what the history is or what's behind it. So my questions would only be like it goes back to faith, right? So if it goes back to meaning, you want to be careful not to make up a meaning or make up a truth. Um, to be that would be my only approach would be I don't want to be misled away from the truth. That's all. But
Hmm.
I don't know anything about it.
That's very interesting. I don't really even have a question for you after that, but I do see that the void or the gap around meeting is filled with your faith, and I would imagine at least that um, this is part of how you would survey the landscape of somebody when you engage with them in therapy, and probably ascertain how important their faith is and how they're individually driving meaning. Would that be a fair assessment? You're not trying to talk them out of anything. You're really it's an individual experience, I suppose. Is that fair to say?
Everything's individual. So yeah, definitely we're not talking anybody out of their faith or what they believe and when it comes down to whatever their faith system is or belief system. No, that has nothing to do with what we do in logotherapy. And one other important thing that I need to say about it to help get your head closer to it is what we recognize in logotherapy is that for something, meaning is always registered along that which we value. So Daniel, what you find meaningful might be very different from what I find meaningful. And the same thing is true for you, Patrick. So, for example, since I value learning and growth, and development, I am always going to have, my lens is going to be that I will find meaning when I feel like I'm learning. Like, to me, this is a meaningful experience because I like to connect and I like to learn. Might be terribly boring for somebody else who's listening to it, or maybe who's part of it. But for me, this is meaningful for me because of what I value. What we can look at when it comes to loss is, if somebody really values being, say, the provider of the family, and let's say it's the man, and he loses his wife first, he can there's one way for him, he can start to make a little more sense of losing his wife, and that he can start to remember that he got to provide for her, gave her a beautiful life, and she appreciated that. And that's a way to start to relate to her and who she was in his life. Even though she's gone, it gives him a capacity to relate to her and enjoy her and love her, because he got to be who he wanted to be in the world in relation to her, even though she's not here anymore. So when it comes down to the meaning aspect, we're always thinking about and trying to relate to the world through that which we value. And when we understand what we value, we can then choose how to discover meaning in that which those events catalyze or surface or elicit that particular value. So it helps you, it just helps, gives you a lens, a way to be able to connect with it through your own level of import, which is your values, and definitely never taking away from whatever your belief system is, or religious upbringing might be, anything like that.
I can relate with that, Patrick. I mean, as somebody that kind of bridges, I said before, a secular believer, I can I can I can hear what Elise is saying, and I can think to myself, um, yeah, that makes sense. And even as somebody from, um, I guess an outsider's perspective in the religious framework, I can say I I still know and aspire to be uh, the best husband that I can be,
Mhm.
and the best father that I can be. And I would say that one of the things that a church organization, a faith could do is um, improve that. And I'm not saying that that's not that an atheist can't have that. I'm absolutely not saying that. But I can see that how people can derive meaning from those traditions. And so yeah, it's almost like you tap into that. Is
Mhm.
that
Yes, very much so. Well said. You allow it to activate. Essentially, you're activating that meaning system. And because meaning is our chief motivator, it's our chief source of energy, then there's something in that to be able to use to help us get through the loss, to make more sense of it, to grow from it. It's that vital energy that we've been talking about here. And when it comes to living, right? Even some of these comments here from Insom.
mm, mm. So Patrick, is that God's work, or is it anathema because it's not described in a particular kind of church doctrine? Is there any pushback that you hear when you listen to that? I'll be honest. I mean, let's work through that. Let's
Mhm.
is that something that either your faith or um, people in the church community would say, hey, that's our territory?
Um, Generally speaking, I think all my church experiences have been around what I guess what you would call traditional values. Um, Not sure what I can add to that. Like, I'm not.
Well, no, that's good. That's good because I don't want to
Yeah.
lead you somewhere that wasn't, didn't come to mind, right? So that's actually a good sign. It to me says that um, I don't know, to use, you can have your cake and eat it too. So Elise is doing good work and perhaps even God's work. So that's very uplifting, right? And
I think going off. Sorry, Daniel. Going off of what Elise was mentioning about values. Like if your meaning is based on values, your values can change. And so really, I was surprised. I was surprised to hear that. Um, when my thought process, when it came to meaning, I thought, there's one truth, and everything else outside of that truth, like helping find, if it's helping find someone's meaning, they can make that up, what their value is, and all our values could be different. And there's no governing law to say like this is moral or immoral. And I know Elise was getting at like, uh, let's say it's like a spouse that's passed away, and you've given them their best life as their spouse, their partner, their supporter, their parent, anything like that, and you can believe that, oh, like those are all the cherished memories. Um, and I wasn't thinking about any of that when the thought of like logos and someone's meaning. So I thought about truth instead of values. So it was interesting. I thought it was really interesting to hear that from you, Elise. Yeah, I'm gonna be thinking more about it later, I promise.
It's a beautiful conversation.
yeah, so truth. This is interesting, and I think if I'm being explicit about what I'm interpreting or the vibes that I'm getting from Patrick, the one overarching truth is his belief system in God and in Jesus Christ. So um, that's interesting. So let's role play this a little bit. You realize very quickly that somebody like Patrick has that orientation. Then you're exploring that single source of truth with him as a part of the therapy. Isn't that correct?
And I want to know what that truth means to him. Yes. Especially in relation to a loss.
Ah, well, that's a very good. So, how do we get you to authentically unpack what that overarching single source of truth means in direct relationship to a loss? For example, your father. How would you what comes to mind when I throw that kind of question your way, Patrick?
I'll answer that, and it comes from surrendering to what I've always believed, but maybe I never admitted to myself in many ways. So, yeah, it wasn't all. It was a relationship of conflict, not like, I don't know. Um, it was always a heated relationship. How about that? And my dad did the best he can with what he had. Um, I don't know what my dad's life was like in the Czech Republic. Back then, it was Czechoslovakia. I know my dad escaped from the Iron Curtain, or Russia's rule. Escaped to Canada. Took him 2 years to get here, and then once he got here, he has a wife. So my dad never divorced by then. So somehow he calls back. He's like, "Hey, honey, I'm in Canada. Get on the plane." I don't know. However, they're supposed to reunite people, and she decided to stay. So there's like sort of spotty information about my dad's history. Um, I guess this is like the European generation of the baby boomers. Probably didn't talk about their problems. Probably didn't share things, um, but wanted to teach you lessons anyways. And however I can justify it, I think my dad did the best he can with his upbringing and what he knew, and I know he loved me. So dealing with a loss that I thought, would there be something that I should have said before he passed away? No, everything's been said. Probably 20 years before he passed. So by the time he came, and I knew his health was getting a little bit worse and worse over time. And it was just a matter of time where, I would get a phone call from somebody saying, that's it, like he's going to the hospital or he's on his way out. And yeah, being truthful with yourself for that meaning of loss right away. I think just confront it. Whatever, if there's something that is left unsaid for someone else's experience, maybe share it with somebody else. Pray. If you have to pray, do that.
Very interesting. I mean, and from a philosopher's perspective or a Socratic philosopher's perspective, Socrates gave the world a lot of wisdom, or maybe through Plato, but the idea was kind of like learning to how to live so that you can die peacefully.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
And so I'm hearing you say that, and it's almost like there's a mixture of stoic sensibility there where you've already been able to frame um, the meaning of your father in a larger context and come to terms with it in the framework which you believe in, and that's empowered you, and it's given you a sense of peace. Um,
Daniel, you're
would that
right.
be
I
fair to
laid
say?
I laid that I laid that work many years before that. Probably when I moved out of my parents' house. Um, I'm gonna add to this. I had my wife and I were dating. We were serious at this point. We would have conversations, go for walks, and one of the questions was, if we were married and one of us passed away, what would you do? So we would have had this conversation more than 20 years ago, in Fairfield. Daniel knows where we would be. There's cherry blossoms. It's beautiful. It's like picturesque. This is Victoria, at least at the time of year where we're counting flowers when everywhere else is typically snowing in North America. And we had that very morbid conversation, like, well, how long would it take before you think you'd be ready for someone else to be your partner in life? Yeah, it's just a strange. Sorry, you brought up memories, Daniel. It's all your fault. And yeah, not that I ever want to face that myself. Like at one point, either I'm gonna pass away, or my wife will pass away. One before,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It wouldn't be the same. It would not be the same as my dad passing away, or my grandma passing away when I was like a teenager. We were all around her bed, me, my cousins, my aunt, um, maybe my uncle. It's kind of blurry. It's a long time ago in the hospital, and her, we were there in time to say goodbye, and her to go all silent. I can't remember. It's kind of a blur, right? It's not like that, but I could not imagine.
Yeah. It's almost inconceivable because you've bonded so completely with that other half that you can't even understand what the experience is until you're living it, and
Like,
that's
not everybody's
beautiful.
marriages are like all sunshine and daisies. There's times when there's challenges and there's times when it's great. So there's some ups and downs, but like, you know, we're consciously at times it doesn't go as well as we expect, and then we work again to make it work. So to lose that person after never giving up. That would be tough. I don't even want to pretend that I'm laying any groundwork to like being able to cope with that. I'm not sure if I can or could. How about that?
So that would be the epitome and the definition of loss that you would wholeheartedly experience and that you're completely unprepared for, which is, maybe some of the purpose that Elise is cultivating, right? With meaning and purpose. That's very, very cool. Elise, what would you have to say about that? And let's start thinking about wrapping up the show, because we're at the top of the hour and I haven't really asked you guys how you guys are doing for time or anything, but you're good, Patrick. Elise, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. Yeah. Well, so this is totally where, somebody who is a logotherapist and somebody who is out to activate meaning and purpose would want to try to help Patrick if, he were to have a loss of any kind of loss in his life, is to help, activate his access to and utilization of his own naturally occurring spiritual resources. They're already there for him to be able to handle this loss. I don't wish this on anybody, but reality is we're all going to lose somebody that's really important to us at some point. And so how we manage that is critical. I just lost my mentor of, I guess he was probably in my life for close to 4 decades. He just died in March. But he prepared me over all these years. So I knew it was coming, but still it's a loss for me. But when you think about what do humans go through, I mean, humans go through horrible, atrocious things. They go through awful diseases. They get in horrible accidents where maybe they lose a limb or something, and they lose their sight, their hearing. What humans go through awful things, war. I mean, and yet we can come through the other side bigger and more prepared and capable of experiencing the beauty of life and the connection that's available to us. And so these instances of whatever life that throws at us are the way that we allow ourselves to relate to them can be tremendous openings to growth, to being able to allow ourselves to experience joy and awe on a whole different level we never got to have before, while still missing terribly the person that we lost, while still feeling that emptiness of them not by our side. They're not sleeping next to us at night anymore. They're not having breakfast with us in the morning. We're not going to go sailing together on Saturday morning. So it's the space to be able to help people recognize the beautiful resilience and strength that's already in them waiting to be activated. It's there. Humans are amazing, amazing creatures. So of course, what am I doing in the world is I'm trying to help steward that strength, that growth journey, to embrace the fullness of humanity. And in so doing, the beauty of life that really is there, even when we lose people. So it's a message of hope. It's a message of encouragement, empowerment, and pulling as many, resources from within as I can possibly help activate.
That's amazing.
Thank you. It's amazing work to get to do. Let me tell you that. It's amazing work to get to do.
Provides a little bit of meaning in your life, I suppose, at least.
It does, just a smidge. Just a touch.
So Patrick and I have a bit of a connection. I didn't have any desire to really go into great detail about it, but we have this mutual. He was a friend / acquaintance, and I'm not sure to the degree that he was for you. I'm not going to bring his name up because it's maybe not really fair. But anyways, I found that we have this shared acquaintance friend, and very quickly he went from healthy, father to in the hospital with cancer. And
being a cancer survivor, and it's come back.
Yeah. And it was just very shocking because I think it's pretty advanced and pretty serious. So I mean, this is something that the C word a lot of people have to face, right? But I was really taken about how fast that that happened.
Mhm.
You're going about your daily, weekly regime, and then all of a sudden he's just flat on his back,
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
what was your thoughts about it? Did you get hit the same way when you heard about that, Patrick?
I was a little bit surprised because he was sounding so positive. I can't remember if it was like September, October last year. He said, his throat was hurting. He's going to go back in there, and it seems optimistic. And then by the time he had the appointment, and I followed up with him, I didn't hear back. And by then we were texting, and yeah, it's advanced stages. He only has so many months. Um, and Christmas happened, and then followed up a little while after, and he's saying, well, I can't remember exactly if it's 6 to 12 months to live, and it's already been 6 months. And I thought, like, it's for somebody that I probably didn't spend a lot of time with. I'm sure I spoke to on the phone for many more hours than actually being in person. And I'll put it this way: when I first started real estate, I thought, why would I ever become friends with realtors? They're not going to buy a house from me. They're not going to sell a house for me. Why would I associate with other realtors, like, in my profession? It took me 10 years before I started being social and connecting. These are the only other people that understand what your problems are. We go through all the same things. And then we add, I'm sure this is similar in other professions or sales or anything like that, but and then you start adding on top of things like people passing away or getting sick, and divorces, everything under the sun, bankruptcies, and those are, everybody's going through not the same problems, but everybody's going through something. And surprisingly, like, some of the people that I work with that are my competitors, I've gotten really close to, just as friends. Like, I don't know why. I should be their competitor. It's a ruthless thing, but it's not. you know Everybody out there is human, and so I don't know if I'm relating or empathizing. um I don't want myself to be going through that. Maybe I'm scared. Maybe I'm scared, because I see so many people around us that have gone through cancer, survived cancer twice, 3 times. Brian, I'm gonna keep praying for him. I don't know, right? So
Mm.
it's
Yeah.
I think as we get
That's what spurred the conversation, right? That's what spurred me
yeah.
to actually. That was the whole impetus behind the show, for everybody. And I didn't. I'm not. I didn't want to put him on display because I just didn't. Maybe it wasn't fair to his family or to his privacy or anything like that. But um, yeah, and I'm not a realtor, but I knew him as a realtor, and
Yeah.
you're a realtor, and well, look at that. You're bringing uh, meaning to the profession there, Patrick. Look at meaning is
I'm
just oozing
humanizing.
out of you.
I'm humanizing.
You're humanizing. Yeah, well, then that's the natural release, right? So, yeah, yeah, it's really
How are you feeling about him?
well. I guess maybe where I would take it is that I think deep down there probably is a little bit of that. Like, I don't want that to happen to me. If I'm really being honest, there's
Yeah.
probably a wave of that, right? There's a wave of that, and I think there's an odd part of our human psyche that I'm not going to say derives satisfaction about the misery of other people, but somehow it props you up a little bit. I mean, in a way, I'm not. I'm acknowledging that from a standpoint of something sobering and blessings. Count your blessings. Count your blessings. And then
Mm.
they say, well, if that was the extent of your depth, then you'd be a pretty shallow person, I'd have to say, right? Because that's, if that was then, now I pass the torch on to either Patrick or Elise, then I'd say, Dan, you kind of missed it, because that's a pretty shallow, vessel that you're inhabiting. The other part, I think, of Brian, because we've already mentioned his name, he's there's something about him when I first met him that I gravitated towards, right? And I think it was his persistence, for sure, but I think it was his business savvy persistence and willingness to problem solve, right? So then we just get into this engaged conversation about stuff, and I think we had talked about tiny homes, or and that was interesting about him, because it is interesting about him because from an outsider, I think if you don't have a history with a realtor, then if you do come across somebody, you want to have an interesting conversation with them about potentials, or it's not either binary, or you're selling yes or no and will you sign on the line. It's kind of like, tell me about a few other things, build some rapport, shoot the shit, let's network, and see how we can cohabitate in this idea of meaning together, right? To a limited degree. And I think that network effect of people within your community, I think that's really important. Tonight, at least, they said that this has been a very valuable conversation. We are deriving meaning in real time, which is very interesting, probably because we're approaching this in an honest way. And I think that that is unforgettable. In Lascaux, so there's this idea of Lascaux where you have the caves in France, and they've got that handprint. You've seen them in the caves, right? Where this like declaration of human beings. Okay, so at least this is 30,000 years ago. You've got cave paintings, and you've got pictures of buffalo or antelope or whatever versions there were back 30,000 years ago. Some slight variation of evolution with these animals, and then the hunters, and you have depictions of the hunter-gatherers on these walls, on these cave walls. And it's always just amazing to me that this is almost like a captivated experience of theater, because you'd have to crawl into these caves and with a flickering candle see almost some three-dimensional sort of movement on the walls. Well, one really, really striking image is the hand that's facing on the wall. And I think people intuitively know that means I was here, that and we can 30,000 years relate with that. Where am I taking this sort of sketch and this vignette of the Lascaux cave paintings? Well, viewers, I want you to think to yourself and hold your hand up and think, how many people in this world love you and truly see you for who you are? Now, maybe the lucky ones amongst us might have both hands up in the air. But there's not a lot. When you really, really drill down to how many people really, really love you and can experience your who you are, it's, for most people, it's a fairly small number.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's just that's a nice thing to, I think, maybe meditate on and end the show on. I think something for people to think of. And any last words, Elise, Patrick?
Um, I think people do we metaphorically? I could be wrong. We still leave handprints on cement to leave our mark. So, and I think the way Daniel, you're saying it, after we've left this world, have we left our mark with people that, uh, not just our loved ones, would remember us, but how impactful you might have been to others by leaving your handprint somewhere.
It's beautiful. I would just say that everybody wants to matter. Everybody wants to know their lives matter. And that I would say that along the way, that the extent to which we are capable of being able to fully experience the beauty of being alive and having relationships in our life, the extent to which we can actually discover and experience that meaning is really what adds all the color and the richness to our lives and allows us to be able to further give that imprint, to actually make that bigger difference to those in our lives with whom we touch.
Very nice. Very nice. Thank you, guys. We'll end on that. And I'm going to end on an advertisement. And it's not to cheapen it. It's just because it seems like something I've neglected all evening. So thank you guys for joining me. And thank you, everybody, for watching.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Elise.
And welcome to Something or Other Publishing, or as our friends like to call us, Soup. Soup is a platform that connects authors, readers, and service providers in one convenient place. Choose Soup if you're an author with a great book idea and you're looking for a publisher offering hands-on coaching in some of the best royalties in the business. Or if you're a reader who enjoys engaging with celebrated and emerging authors. We already have over 3,000 of them, and more are joining every day. You can even win free books by voting on their book ideas. Or maybe you're a service provider and you're looking to engage with over 3,000 authors. We're here to help. So whether you're an author, a reader, or a service provider, you're in the right place at Soup. Contact us at help@soupllc.com to learn more.